Okay, welcome everybody to the yet to be named podcast. So, this is our HETAS podcast, all about solid fuel. We're going to cover off a lot of the wood stuff as well. So, we're going to talk about biomass, we're going to talk about the industry, we're going to talk about stoves, we're going to talk about installation, we're going to talk about competent person schemes and standards, and we're going to try and have a bit of fun doing it. So, I'm your host, I'm Barry Cope, I'm the Chief Executive of the Cleaner Safer Group. We're also going to talk a little bit more about what the Cleaner is, what it does. We're going to get right into that. Joining me today, we have producer Alan on the ones and twos behind the scenes. And we also have our communications executive. I've just learned that job title. So we have our good friend Charlie trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. This is actually the second time we recorded the podcast. First time we had a lot of fun doing it. It just didn't quite go as we thought it would. So we brought backups. We brought some spare people to make sure we can stay on the straight and narrow. We can keep it well. What's the point of this podcast? Well, one of the things I think that HETAS does do, we communicate very well in a lot of our mediums. We talk a lot on our social media. We send out good, lengthy, technical documentation. But I think one of the things we don't quite do, and this is what the gap of this podcast is to fill, is to talk to our members more. And nowadays, it's very difficult to not be working and attend big events. Those days it's just not the same as it used to be. I used to attend big conferences with 10,000 people. We have less and less of those in the industry. So we're going to try something new. We're going to talk to you on our podcast. Those of you that travel around a lot for work can download a copy of this. It will be available on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll try and get it out as many places as we can. Sometimes we'll have a bit of show and tell, might have some props. But let's get right into it. Today's episode, we're going to start by kicking off and talking about the very recent Defra consultation that came out. It's actually now closed. By the time we air this episode, it's been closed. HETAS have given a pretty lengthy response, and that's Charlie, who's with us now on the ones and twos behind the scenes. Charlie's job was to collate so much information, and he's done a brilliant job of doing that. We really needed to collate a lot of that information so that we could, we're taking into account the views of our members, we're taking into account the views of our technical staff, the views of our commercial staff, the general public that talk to us a lot as well. We had to take into account as much as we possibly could. So we're going to talk about actually what that consultation consisted of. We're going to talk about some of our responses. Some of you may know I'm not really from this industry. So I've been now with HETAS and Wood as part of the Cleaners for 9 months, and I'm still very much on my learning journey. So what better way for me to document and to learn than actually just do the podcast, just record it so you can hear me ask some silly questions. So if I do ask some silly questions, it's probably because I just don't know the answer to it. I think one of the biggest strengths you can have is knowing your weaknesses. So I'm going to bring in some technical expertise. We're going to talk about the response we made. We're going to talk about why we did some certain things, and I'm going to do the thing that makes our marketing team nervous. I'm going to question why we do certain things and why we don't say certain things, because there's always reasons, and there's always deeper reasons that I don't know about. This history that I don't know about that we can go into. Hopefully, we always have the opportunity. The beauty of the podcast is we can edit out anything that doesn't get in. So there may be some stuff that gets left on the cutting room floor, but hopefully not. As you'll hear, this isn't designed to be the perfect podcast. This isn't designed to be a big marketing tool and super polished. We want it to be a little bit raw. We want it to bring in people from the industry that can talk to us open and honestly, so that we can tell you, how we are doing things, or where we think we're doing well and where we're not doing well. Finally, before I bring Calvin in, make sure you obviously like and subscribe. That sounds like a standard thing we all need to say on our podcasts. But like and subscribe. If you're watching on one of the mediums, you can do that. It doesn't cost you a penny to subscribe. And also talk to us. I'm desperately going to read these comments. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us who you would like as a guest. That would be helpful for us. We have a big long list of people we're going to bring in through this first season. But it would be really helpful if you can think of somebody that may be really good for us to talk to. So we're going to try and get local government. We're going to speak to, we'll hopefully speak to some installers. Definitely going to speak to at least one sweep, maybe a couple more. We're going to talk to fuel suppliers. We're going to talk to anyone that will actually talk to us. Very, very final point. I mentioned at the very opening, we don't have a name for this podcast yet. There's actually a bit of a debate and a bit of a competition going around the office as to what we should call it. But if you've got anything funny, I mean, by the time this goes out, we've probably got a name for it, but maybe we can rename it for season 2. So tell us some funny puns that we can name the podcast. So with that, I'm going to bring in our first guest, Calvin May. Calvin is our head of technical. What this guy doesn't know about solid fuel isn't worth knowing, and really proud that he is one of ours, and we can go to him. The industry can phone, we can speak, and he's part of our senior leadership team. So what better person to bring on than to talk to Calvin? So we're going to bring him in from backstage, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome, Calvin. I don't know if you could hear any of the intro. This is the first episode. We changed the way we set up the mics, so was you able to hear?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Also enjoying the background. We decked out one of the meeting rooms here to be, make sure the audio quality when we're recording this podcast is really good. But we don't have any fancy logos behind me, just these interesting lines. So I'm enjoying the fact that we've got a nice HETAS logo behind you. Something I might need to do for future episodes. Give yourself a little introduction.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, my name's Calvin May. I'm the head of technical services here at HETAS. Been in the industry for about 16 years or so quite a long time. Been through quite a lot of policy changes, quite a lot of innovation pieces throughout the industry. I currently do a number of roles here. So I currently manage the HETAS technical helpline. So any installers out there who ring in for technical advice, you may have spoken to me over the phone. It's always good to speak to installers, get their feedback, understand exactly what's going out in the field, understand the issues that people are experiencing and how standards, technical information, guidance can help resolve a lot of the issues and innovation pieces that come to the forefront of the market every day. The other element is I currently work a lot in the standards arena. So I sit on a lot of BSI committees, championing standards for both the UK and across Europe. So a lot of the policy changes in terms of things like eco-design, Defra exemption, appliance testing standards, installation standards, I've probably been at the forefront of a lot of them alongside a lot of the other members of the industry. So yeah, good podcast to start off with, and hopefully I can provide some insights and things of what's going on now and into the future.
If I was to ask you a question, what's the biggest thing that's changed from when you first started here? It's nearly 20 years, it has to be. What's the biggest change that you've seen from back then to today?
First started, we only had 6 members of staff, so I think I was the 7th. As you can imagine, it's grown massively in that time. Over that 16 years, we now got around 73 members of staff, so a substantial amount of growth that we've had internally. We've taken on a lot of contracts. We now do the Wood Ready to Burn scheme. We do the Ready to Burn MSF, the Defra contract. So all of those sort of changes in terms of staff and more people has been warranted. But from a standards point of view, I think the biggest thing for me is when I first started, there were no regulations around emissions. The only requirement there was for CO and PMs for smoke control areas. And things have come on massively sort of in those 16 years or so. We now have a lot more robust processes in terms of what we certify as products, installers, training centres, retailers. It really has come a long way, and it's a credit to the industry that things have been and grown that rapidly in such a short space of time, and it's important that we carry on doing it.
Do you say that's made things safer? Would that be a good...
Absolutely.
In those nearly 20 years for the industry?
So again, we're always learning. Every day's a learning day. Like you say, there's more innovative products that have been brought to the market. So things like insulation boards, direct air kits, all of these come to the market, and it's about making sure the standards of things keep up. So it's about making sure that they can be fitted safely. All the remits are covered. Testing, any required testing is also covered as well, to make sure that when they're put into people's homes, that they can operate them both safely and environmentally friendly.
Excellent. So moving on to the Defra solid fuel consultation. Give me in 60 seconds, what are they consulting on?
It's a really interesting one. So obviously over the last sort of, since my time and sort of 50 years since the Clean Air Act came into fruition, appliances and fuels have always been required to meet certain emissions limits to make sure that you can burn them responsibly. And I think now with a lot of the sort of the press that's going on, and government are starting to listen and starting to understand that there are technologies out there that are better than others. And it's about making sure that consumers, when purchasing products, are pushed to the right sorts of appliances, so we continue to meet our air quality impacts, continue to burn things responsibly, and we can move away from some of the older, inefficient, cost heavy technologies like open fires, and move with the times, move with innovation, save a bit of money in the long run as well.
So you mentioned there about emissions. I know something is one of the big discussion points in the consultation is about the amount of grams per hour. So we're suggesting the move takes us from 5 grams an hour down to 1 gram an hour for new stoves. What do we mean when we're talking about 5 grams an hour?
So essentially, any carbon-intensive fuel will emit some form of pollutants when it's burned. Gas, oil, solid fuel, they all do. And it's about making sure that the things like PM2.5s, which is shorthand for particulate matter, are essentially, we're only emitting limits that meet guidelines, and that when they're fitted in the home, they're installed correctly, so that they're dispersed through a fully functioning chimney out into atmosphere. So it's all about making sure that we continue to reduce our air quality impacts, because at the end of the day, we all breathe the same air. We all want improved air quality. And it's about making sure that solid fuel heating goes along with that journey as well.
Okay, so do you think going from 5 grams to 1 gram is achievable if Defra made the decision, or local government made the decision to
Yeah.
switch that on overnight and say, as of tomorrow, it's 1 gram an hour
It's an
for new
interesting
stoves?
concept, because it's always difficult to set limits, because it needs to meet a whole host of different criteria. We did some manufacturer surveying and feedback, and understandably, I think most of the industry are on board with things. I think if you look at our certification data, I think 93% of our cleaner choice appliances would meet it. So if this policy came into fruition tomorrow, you'd still be able to purchase 93% of the listed cleaner choice appliances that are on our scheme already. So it shows that manufacturers are already doing it. I think there's just some research and development for some of the older models that are quite popular. There's a lot of brand loyalty out there. People understand, they have the brands that they like, the operational practices that they're used to. And it's just about shifting behavior, really. It's about pushing people towards, when they decide on what type of appliance that they want, thinking about the environmental impacts alongside things like efficiency, aesthetics. So yeah, it's a complete behavioral shift for the consumer, but it's something that we need to do.
Yeah, which, I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm concerned that turning it on overnight would cause a lot of the smaller companies, and maybe some of the really bigger companies, a lot of issues. It's a very short amount of time potentially to innovate. So would a 3 or 5 year lead in be more appropriate? Give them a bit of time to make sure their product line.
Absolutely. I think the transitional piece is an interesting one. I think it's one that needs discussion, which is why I think it forms part of the consultation. There are benefits to it. Like you say, it gives small and medium enterprise businesses time to do their R&D, understand their product ranges, put their things through test. We're quite in a challenging time at the moment, in that we don't have many recognized testing institutes for people to undertake testing to verify their emissions. And the other argument is about making sure that we don't flood the market with particularly non-EIP, non-eco-design stoves, and we do it over a longer period. Setting timescales is always a benefit. Mapping out a journey, a roadmap journey, can also help as well. So that if we decided tomorrow or next year, we're not waiting until the 31st of December for a whole host of non-compliant appliances flooding the market, because, like we say, stoves can last a substantial amount of time, 20 plus years. So it's about making sure we do it in the right way, and there is a transitional piece. But it all relates to how the policy is worded and how regulation around the consultation formulates it properly. We talk about placing on the market. So that's when a manufacturer first places a product on the market. It's about making sure that that fits in with the criteria of stoves not flooding the market in one jump.
So you mentioned about testing. I've always been intrigued. How on earth do you test grams per hour from a new stove? Now, I know that you mentioned that there's less and less companies doing the testing, which is going to be an industry problem. But how do they test? It seems like such a tiny amount for such a a raw industry.
Yeah. Without getting too technical, there are a number of ways that you can do it. So there's recognised standards that we have here in the UK. There's a recognised standard in Norway, and there's a recognised standard over in Germany as well. But essentially, it's about making sure that what's done in the testing lab marries up with what happens in the real world when it's in somebody's home. So it's always quite a difficult challenge. You need standardized testing within a laboratory. So essentially, what they do is they hook it up to what we call an electrostatic precipitator, and they run the appliance in line with the manufacturer's instructions, like you would do if you were burning in the home. And they essentially run it for one cycle of around 45 minutes, measure the concentration of pollutants in the flue gases through this very clever, sophisticated piece of equipment. They weigh it beforehand, they weigh it afterhand, and obviously the difference in weights gives you sort of an idea of how many of relevant pollutants it's collected within that burn cycle. And then it's recorded, written into a test report, and then manufacturers can essentially use that to market their products, best versus worst, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible that they're measuring over quite a short period of time and measuring such a tiny amount of pollutants coming out of the flue of the stove, and then doing it to such accuracy. What's the lowest accuracy?
I think the ESP is recognised as picking up around 98% of the particulates that are emitted. So it is one of the most accurate and robust emissions methodologies that we have, and it's nice to know it's the UK sort of leading the way on robustness in terms of that as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Coming back to the Defra consultation, one of the topics that's discussed is about periodic retesting of stoves. So right now, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can put a stove out onto the market. You have to do quite a lot of testing and certification to get a product out onto the market. But once it's out there, there typically is no retesting or no checking that something hasn't changed outside of any kind of CE marking laws or UKCA marking laws, and you can't substantially change something.
It's about learning about some of the other certification schemes that exist. So there's surveillance in things like the wood ready to burn on the fuel side, and also on the manufactured solid fuel side as well. Surveillance is a really important one. I think when we learn from those schemes that there is a bit of a gap in enforcement, and I think surveillance testing, it just helps you collate that really sophisticated data, and it gives you a viewpoint about how appliances over the years are shifting in terms of how they perform. We know that appliances are serviced on a regular basis, chimneys are swept. So again, if followed the sort of the surveillance framework that they have for those other schemes, we can get some really sort of hardcore data that we can then utilize, and it'll help us be more accurate in our air quality emissions inventory data that we have. It will help paint a better picture about how far stoves do contribute to our air quality impacts. There are some things that we can do to improve things. There's things like source apportionment, so understanding exactly what types of particulates are formulated when we burn, solid base fuels. And I think those things are sort of in the pipeline at the moment, but it is sort of a future project, something that the industry is looking at, which will help massively.
One of the things that's always interested me, Calvin, was how do we actually test stoves? I mean, what does the process look like? Because the amount we're measuring is incredibly small.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is done under laboratory conditions. We have it that way so that we can standardize appliance testing across the many relevant EU member states. And again, it's about ensuring that we sort of mirror real life burning practices as best that we can, because obviously a stove in a laboratory is going to operate completely differently to a stove in somebody's home. A lot of test methodologies use things like forced draft, whereas when you put it out to somebody's home, it operates under natural draft as well. So it's about making sure that we replicate real life as possible, but do it in such a way that there's repeatability in terms of appliance testing. And it's probably what you think of. So essentially, there'll be a little rig that will look like a little recess in the laboratory, and they'll put the appliance in there, and then essentially just operate it in accordance with the manufacturing instructions over around a 45-minute burn cycle. And what they'll do is they'll measure the flue gases through a natural draft chimney through what we call an electrostatic precipitator, and essentially that collects a lot of the PM pollutants or smoke pollutants, and then they essentially take it to a weighing room and they weigh it before the test started and weigh it afterwards. And the differentials in weight will tell them how much of the pollutants were collected on the ESP.
It's incredibly scientific. I just love the balance between the kind of science of it and how delicate and how accurate the readings are, and the kind of nature of just solid fuel. the contrast for me is always super interesting. Next question is about periodic retesting itself. So if we do periodic retesting, this is in the Defra consultation, we speak about it being in every 5 years or so, I think was mentioned in the consultation. I've got a nod from Charlie. So there was a discussion or a line of conversation about periodic retesting and having stoves retested every 5 years. Well, not existing ones, the new ones that are coming out onto the market. Because I think, if I'm right, technically, although you have to do a lot of testing to get a stove on the market, once it's out there, there's no requirement for retesting.
So surveillance is apparent in things like the ready-to-burn contract for wood-based fuels and solid manufactured fuels. And again, a lot of the research we do with suppliers shows that there are large thinking in terms of gaps in things on things like surveillance. And even with surveillance, there are improvements that can be made. So, yeah, I think with innovation kicking off with appliance technologies, there's things like catalytic converters being put into appliances now. Manufacturers are trying to make stoves as clean as possible. So innovation really does take hold, and it is quite a very fast process. So it's about making sure that those changes don't impact things too much, and we're confident that we can go to government officials to show them that when appliances do change, it's not having a detrimental impact on our air quality emissions. So I'm fully in favour of supporting a surveillance regime. We just need to make sure that it's tailored in the right way. It supports all elements of the industry. It supports small and medium enterprises. So there are a number of options that we have. We can either mandate 5-yearly testing, or we could go for a halfway hybrid house where we could look at something like a FPC, which is a factory production control procedure, where assessors actually go to manufacturing facilities and make sure that what's being manufactured on the product line marries up with things like their quality processes, the standards that we utilize every day, and makes an assessment on that. It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot less investment. So again, it's just making sure that, that we do it in the right way that supports the industry in meeting compliance. Really.
Yeah, I'm glad you went down that road, because I was interested in. I have a couple of reference points for it. So many people, well, hopefully at least some people that are watching, will know me from the air tightness world. And one of the things we did a lot of is calibrate the equipment we used. And really, year to year, nothing ever changed. We would test everything every year, and there were certain bits of kit that regularly would fall out of calibration and just met the end of their life cycle. But the actual blower door fans themselves rarely changed all that much. It was just the occasional one here or there. So testing always felt, or recalibrating always felt, in a lot of occasions, a lot of times, just not quite. I wouldn't say worth the money, because we were finding ones that were broken, but it just felt a bit too much sometimes. And from my other hat, back with my, I used to work for BM Charter. We used to do the fire door testing, fire door certification. They had this wonderful hybrid system where there would be factory production control that would enable people to go to the factories, make sure things haven't changed. And with that, you could adjust your burning schedule. So you still had to do lots of burning, and fire doors, obviously being a life safety piece of equipment, was important to do so. But the factory production control was the bit I was most interested in, because really, if you're innovating a new product or a couple of your products each year, you don't really want to have to send products that you've been selling for 25 years through 5-yearly cycle changing if nothing is changing, if you have the same suppliers, the same people, the same everything. So having the option, I think, would be really good for the industry. Yes, there does need to be some form of check and some form of control, but for some small companies, having 5-yearly retesting would sink them. I mean, this isn't cheap. We're talking thousands of pounds for each test, for each product, and how far do we take that? So, yeah, for me, very interesting. That I think one of the proposals we put back in our response was that we need to look at all of those options, from the factory production control right through to some companies would be more than happy just to send it every 5 years, not to have to go through that. So I've been both sides of that fence in various industries before. So I hope Defra take our advice on board there. Moving on to what is probably, for me, the one thing that everybody's been talking about in this Defra consultation. I mean, the change to go from 5 grams an hour to 1 gram an hour is pretty big. But the one thing people keep talking to me about is labeling for appliances and fuels. It just seems to have, for some people, they like it, and some people, this is just the worst bit of the whole thing. They are absolutely against it.
Exactly. So they're looking at sort of similar A to G, A to C rating system like you see on fridges in the refrigeration industry. Um, and essentially just like you say, just trying to provide a bit more information to the consumer. But I'm a bit on the fence when it comes to things like this because in the solid fuel industry, you may not even get to the point of sale element before you've chosen your stove. So, like I talked about earlier, there is a lot of brand loyalty out there. Consumers do speak to their installers, their retailers, their servicing engineers to get a better understanding of what they feel are the better, more efficient, best available technology products that exist. So it could become a time when you don't even see the label. You could have your stove installed tomorrow, and you'll only see it during the commissioning and handover phase. By then, that information on there is too late. That they wouldn't have even referenced it, wouldn't have even known it was there. It would have been around these manufacturers have these sort of very nice looking stoves in the showrooms, and they don't really want to spoil it with with even more labels, with even more information. So sometimes they hide it around the back. And again, yeah, it's not easily referenceable. So I think labels do have a place. Do I think they have a place within our industry? It'd be interesting to find out what the responses to the consultation were on this matter, because obviously it doesn't just impact HETAS as a certification body, but a wide range of stakeholders that need to portray the right set of information. They need to be legible. They need to be in the places where our consumer base are likely to see them. So
I'm glad you said that, because my next question was right on that note, which is, uh, I mean, the labels may go ahead, Defra may absolutely do that. Uh, what what do you think would actually achieve more? If you had, if labeling was X amount of money and it was going to cost the industry X amount.
it would definitely be the educational piece. So again, it would be around things like local authorities, stakeholders, certification bodies, having an aligned set of guidelines, information, because a lot of what we do is around internet sales. So again, we're talking about labeling that goes physically on the product, but people utilize the internet nowadays. Internet sales are massive now. So it's about making sure that websites, manufacturer websites, certification body websites portray the right pieces of information in the right way. So I'd certainly like to see the funding go down that route. Campaigns are always a good one. Internet campaigns, TV campaigns, all those sorts of elements as well, but with the right messaging. So again, not just a whole don't do this, don't do that. It needs to be portrayed in the right way. What are the things that we should be doing? How can we operate these appliances in the right way? So it's less about what not to do and more about what we can do. So again, not slumbering the appliance. That's a massive one that we hear on the consumer and the technical helplines. People still slumber their appliances, which means that they essentially just turn them down at night before they go to bed, when they should be switching them off completely. And again, operating them correctly, utilizing the doors in the right way, utilizing air controls, all those sorts of educational things can have a massive effect on our air quality and reduce our air quality impacts. Like I said earlier, it's a massive behavioral shift. People know how their dads and their dads used to operate their appliances, and they continue to do the same things. Appliance technologies have come on massively, and we're now in a very different era in terms of how appliance technologies work. So it's about making sure that everyone is aware of the best way that they can operate their appliances, the best fuels that they can use, the best available technologies. Because if you use the right fuel on the right appliance and operate it correctly, your air quality impact is minimal, if that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned technology, because a lot of people will think technology and stoves and burning wood or burning coal. How can there be technology? I've been on, maybe in the last 3 weeks, the biggest learning journey about stoves since I started, and the technology that goes into a lot of the modern stoves. I mean, nowadays they're connecting via Wi-Fi to your house. We're recovering a lot of the energy, like a KERS system in a car, a kinetic energy recovery system. So with companies like Rico Heat are able to retain and reuse some of that heat and actually send it around your house. We're having valves that open and close automatically depending on the heat to get optimum burning, and therefore substantially less emissions compared to, just as you say, letting it slumber. The actual technology, the physical moving parts, I've been absolutely fascinated that those two worlds have
Yeah, there's two sides to this story. So there's the technologies actually in the stoves themselves. So like you say, Barry, automatic air controls are a big thing now where the appliance runs itself based on its program. Thermostatic air controls, depending on the temperature of the room that the stove is installed in, it can start to turn up, turn down the heat demand for that and really improve your energy efficiency. But also in the systems as well. So you can link a stove up to a thermal store, you can run it, it can heat your hot water and you can improve your energy efficiencies in that way as well. You can link up systems, can link to a whole host of technologies like heat pumps, solar, and just top it up in the winter when when heat pumps and other technologies aren't as prevalent as solid fuel technologies. So there's multitude of ways that you can do it, and stoves have a massive role to play in not only currently but in the future of our industry and in maintaining our energy efficiencies of our homes.
Yeah, I come from the new build world, and I've been absolutely fascinated to see what I've been referring to externally as the Danish model. But in Denmark, it's really common to have a heat pump on your house and a wood burning stove. And having the combination of the two allows you to have a smaller heat pump that's more efficient during the majority of the year. But then your wood burning stove kicks in the winter and is able to top up the heat and make sure that your house gets to that nice temperature. I've had really good conversations with different crown dependencies in the UK and the British Isles, talking about how solid fuel is still incredibly important, particularly to those that are they're very much off grid and they rely on it when the grid isn't as reliable as it could be. So having the mixture of those two things, I find absolutely fascinating. That my old world of super high end solar panels and air tightness and passive house, actually uh, solid fuel burning is such a big part of modern construction, and looking after our fuel.
I'd agree. It's important that we learn from other member states. So every member state does things differently. It's about how we can learn by what others do well and implement it into our policies and procedures so that we can do the same.
Great. Last section on the consultation was about enforcement and penalties. So Defra discussed stronger penalties for non-compliant fuel sales. How do you see enforcement playing out, and what would actually shift behaviour?
So it's actually cheaper to be fined than it is to join the scheme. So I tend to agree with the consultation that they're looking at increasing the fine limits. I think that will go some way into helping things. But yeah, the other thing I think is just about educating and upskilling environmental health officers, let them understand exactly what they're looking for when they go out and look at cases. There's a lot that we do. We run sessions with local authorities to educate them on different types of fuels, different types of appliances, technologies, so that they've got a whole host answer to any queries that are likely to arise during the assessment process. So there's a number of things that we can do to improve. Yeah, I don't think the consultation is as strong as it could be on the enforcement front. When we look at sort of previous data on things like ready to burn, I think it was around 85% of our suppliers find sort of knowledge gaps, compliance gaps in terms of the auditing structure for stuff that we do have current surveillance on. So, yeah, there's still more that we can do, but yeah, it's about upskilling, providing education, providing higher fines, and then putting that into practice and seeing, analysing the data to see if things improve.
That's awesome. I Yeah, I agree. I think for now that wraps up the DEFRA consultation side. I know that HETAS will be putting out, potentially by the time the podcast is released, some of our response and a summary of our response will be already out into the open world. So not quite sure when that's going to land, but I fully suspect we'll start drip feeding that out soon, so you can see our thoughts on the whole consultation. Charlie will vouch that the whole consultation was incredibly long, so we're not gonna publish the whole thing, but we'll summarize it for you to make it a little easier reading. Get that out in due course. Am I correct?
It's out now, 25,000 words, condensed down to 3 not quite as long articles.
Okay. So yeah, already out. That's awesome. So already out, and you'll be able to see that obviously on hetas.co.uk. Calvin, before I let you go, I've got 2 questions for you, not linked to the consultation, but just out of interest, because we're going to have a bunch of people, different stakeholders listening today. First question: what are the top 3 things they can do immediately to help reduce emissions from solid fuel?
Speak to the consumer, ask them loads of questions, get loads of feedback. Because when you go on site and you see something, it can be completely different to what the consumer's doing. Find out what fuel they're using, and if they're not, go have a look at their log store. Biggest one for me is probably educate consumers. So service engineers, heat chimney sweeps, heat service engineers. When you're going out and servicing jobs, speak to the consumer, ask them loads of questions, get loads of feedback. Because when you go on site and you see something, it can be completely different to what the consumer's doing. Find out what fuel they're using, and if they're not, go have a look at their log store. Educate them on things like seasoning practices, where to store fuels, how to de-ash, all those sorts of things. Really would go a long way. It's all around education. So we run a consumer helpline, and we get a whole host of calls from consumers asking these same sorts of questions. So the more that our sort of registrants can go out there and educate people is only going to help things. And again, it's about making sure that you use the brand, make sure that you display your heat credentials proudly, because we take a whole host of the notifications that come through our systems and things. People do like it. People want to use competent engineers, those that are trained, those that come under competent person schemes such as ours. So yeah, don't be afraid to use your branding to push those clean air, high fuel, high quality wood-based fuels credentials.
I think that about wraps up our time together, Calvin. So thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your busy day to talk about the consultation with us. I'll let you get back to your busy day. Well, that just about wraps it up from me. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the yet to be named at the time of recording. We do need your suggestions, so pop those down in the comments. Thank you so much for listening. Those of you that made it all the way to the very end, you can like and subscribe. You'll be able to download this on all of your platforms. If you're listening and you're not watching, go over to YouTube and you can watch us next time. Make sure you subscribe over there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go also subscribe on all of the other platforms, so I can show how much of a roaring success this has been to our friends in the studios. Thanks to Charlie and producer Alan on the ones and twos in the room with me, and thanks to Calvin again for coming out and taking time out of his busy day to come and speak to us. We'll see you again very soon on episode 2 in about a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.